Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to a new episode of Beyond the Noise. So let's keep it real. Many of us are reaching our threshold for coronavirus-related news. It's becoming increasingly nerve-wracking and frankly depressing to read about the soaring number of cases worldwide, or that African countries do not have the infrastructure, financial or human resources needed to adequately respond to this crisis. Just a few days ago, the New York Times published a piece highlighting African countries' lack of access to basic supplies like oxygen and the scarcity of ventilators on the continent. According to the data that gathered, 10 countries have no ventilators, while the most populous nation, Nigeria, has a total of 169. This means one ventilator for over 1 million people. You've heard me right. Now, the limitations of lockdowns and curfews are poking their ugly head all around, namely in Niger, where dozens of young people broke the confinement order last Friday, claiming their right to gather and pray in mosques as the holy month of Ramadan approaches. What's missing from international news coverage, however, is the growing number of creative solutions and efforts that have been burgeoning all around the continent. The Ghana-born pharmaceutical services company, Pharma, has, for example, been working on decentralizing testing. They've recently donated a molecular workstation to the government of Ghana's central lab. According to Pharma, the portable workstation will enable the government to do remote testing instead of waiting to bring samples back to the lab. And this is just the beginning, said the company's CEO in a blog post. I quote, "We are not waiting any longer at Pharma. Over the next few months, we will work with Sansure Biotech to provide over 100 portable molecular workstations and 300,000 test kits to hospitals and clinics across Africa." I think you know it by now, false information travels faster in times of crises. And in the context of the coronavirus, this phenomenon has been dubbed an infodemic by the WHO. A classic example of a falsehood that's been globally disseminated and has persisted over time is the 5G conspiracy theory. It basically posits that 5G, which is used in mobile phone networks and relies on signals carried by radio waves, is somehow responsible for coronavirus. The theory appears to have first emerged via Facebook posts in late January, around the same time the first cases were recorded in the US. Despite the fact that a plethora of scientists and platforms have debunked the claims, including the WHO, influencers and thought leaders, namely in Africa, have continued to spread them. Earlier this month, the former Grand Mufti of Egypt, Ali Goma, reiterated those false claims in a Friday program that was broadcast on several Egyptian channels. Ali Goma also happens to have 4.3 million followers on social media. And the reason why this is problematic is that when people subscribe to such incendiary theories, they sometimes take action. Over the Easter weekend in Nigeria, for example, videos of Nigerian freedom fighters allegedly burning down MTN towers became viral and were met with widespread acceptance from internet users. There are some that spread false information and some who choose to spread awareness and inspire solidarity. On this week's interview segment, we pass the mic to Jamal Ouaibi, an event organizer in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, and coordinator of a fundraising campaign to assist populations affected by the confinement orders in the country.
Merci beaucoup d'avoir accepté de me parler.
Hi, Jamal, and thank you for speaking with me today. I first want to ask you about the situation in Ivory Coast and the government's response to the coronavirus threat. What is your perception of that response?
Déjà, merci pour cette petite interview. Je pense que l'État fait du mieux qu'il peut. Aujourd'hui, on est face à une crise.
Thank you for having me. I think that the government is doing its best. Today we're faced with a crisis that neither us or our parents have ever encountered. And although our governments have had to deal with Ebola a few years ago, it's the first time that they are faced with a pandemic of this magnitude and scope. As much as the government took some time to react, I think that it was necessary. There needed to be some time for reflection. We couldn't have just copy-pasted the methods applied in China or Europe. This time was necessary to prepare a thoughtful response plan that would actually fit our realities. It's now been a month since we've been dealing with this crisis, and a curfew was put in place 3 weeks ago. And we can't expect everything from our government. We're all in this together.
Encore une fois, je pense que dans cette situation, on ne peut pas tout attendre de l'État. On est tous ensemble dans le même bateau.
C'est quelque part de cette réflexion qui est partie de...
And this is sort of why you launched this fundraising campaign in the first place. You had this idea to support the government's response plan and to get involved, but how exactly does this initiative work?
Ça se concrétise.
Alors, on est quand même conscient que le confinement reste l'un des moyens les plus efficaces pour se battre contre cette pandémie.
We are well aware that confinement remains one of the most effective measures to tackle this pandemic. But our realities on the continent are quite different from those in the Western world. With a great majority of people living day by day, it's complicated to impose total confinement. In order to help them, we have to address the main issue. How do they feed themselves? Many jobs are affected, from waiters to security guards and restaurant owners. All of those people are finding themselves in precarious situations, which are even more dire than COVID-19. We started by appealing to our networks on WhatsApp and Instagram. We reached out to our friends and acquaintances. We started listing NGOs that we already worked with. Because one of the challenges that we have on the continent is trust. It's important for people to know that their donations are actually going to reach the communities that are in need. So we launched a challenge for 48 hours and managed to collect enough to support 200 families of about 5 to 7 members, and we also became more visible. More people reached out to us, they wanted to get involved, so my takeaway is that humanity is not dead. It's now been 3 weeks since we started this, and we repeated the challenge. We now have a PayPal account on which donors from France, Canada, and other countries have also contributed. We received donations from Ivorians and non-Ivorians, people who love this country and just want to help.
On a reçu des sous d'Ivoiriens comme de non-Ivoiriens,
Ouais.
de ressortissants qui vivaient en Côte d'Ivoire, qui ont vécu en Côte d'Ivoire, ou qui aiment la Côte d'Ivoire.
Toi aussi, tu es quelque part impacté par cette crise?
Jamal, you are also affected by this crisis and your businesses. How have you managed to reconcile your own personal needs and the worries that might come from being an entrepreneur with this solidarity effort that is quite noble?
Franchement, Alain, je ne me pose pas la question. Dans 3 mois, si je suis encore dans cette situation, on sera tous dans cette situation.
You know, I don't even think about it. If this crisis persists for another 3 months, we will all be in a similar position. This is affecting the economy on a global scale, so I can't just focus on me. I can't make any predictions. What I know is that right now I have no work, but I do have the opportunity to do something else. It takes a bit of time and energy, and that's pretty much all I have at the moment. It's the first time in a while that we actually have the time to do what we want. Now, other people might want to put their time and energy into something else, but we have to remain positive. I hope that even after this crisis is over, we'll sustain our sense of empathy and solidarity that might help change the world we live
D'autres
in.
élans de solidarité et qui pourront peut-être changer un peu la face de notre humanité. Voilà, simplement.
Mais écoute, je l'espère aussi, en tout cas.
En tout cas, merci pour toi, Alain.
Non, merci beaucoup.
Well, this is it for this week's Beyond the Noise. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again next week. And if in the meantime you feel like you've spotted some misinformation online, share it with us via email or DM. I want to hear from you. Goodbye.